So the first couple of episodes of the second season of Invincible have recently been released, and Mark Grayson is a shell of the individual that we once saw. We know why, mainly because of his father and the deceit that came with it. But following on from what happened in the season 1 finale, this season has lent into the character with a completely different angle, and we're seeing a different kind of vulnerability from him. Whilst he's a shell of who he once was, that shell is also cracked, and his mind is in a fragile state. With the character's mind proving to be something which I'm getting a lot of intrigue in within this season, I thought it was worth delving into the mind of Mark and trying to understand what the character is fully going through. So let's get into it. Although Mark hasn't lost his father in terms of death, it's clear to see that he's mourning Nolan, mourning the connection that he once had, mourning his memory before the truth was exposed, and also the life that he used to lead in believing that his father was quite literally not only the world's hero but his own personal hero and inspiration. With grief, it's said that amongst all of it there comes the 5 stages of it, and I think we're actually seeing Mark go through his own kind of 5 stages of grief process. The 5 stages are said to be denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance is the last stage. So far, I think we've seen denial, anger, and depression be exhibited by Mark, but not in the way that one would usually think or come to expect it. Let's start by looking at denial. Denial is said to be the first stage, and throughout the episodes we're seeing Mark not necessarily deny the fact that his father's no longer around, but he's going through denial in the sense that he fears that he'll end up becoming his father. On a countless number of times in only the first few episodes, we've seen him speak with Amber, Eve, Cecil, and even his mother about the prospect that he may one day end up causing as much damage and devastation as what his father did, and the fear that he may have something like that within him. Something that at the moment, Mark is denying the prospect of. However, he is his father's son, and he does have what his father had within him inside of himself too, with him even questioning the smallest things that he'd usually think nothing of, such as when the somatic encoder exploded in episode 1 and he caused a ton of devastation and bloodshed. The first thing that he thought of was how similar he was to his father, and he wanted to be assured that he wasn't as bad as what he was. With the first episode opening up within the dimension with him looking at the cliff where his father was pummeling him into the surface of it and leaving him on the cusp of having long-term damage, it showed that that was the lasting image that was ingrained within his mind of his father, and he was prepared to deny the fact that he could ever be an individual that would actively cause so much devastation. The fact that he returned to the cliff, it was almost like going to a tombstone, the last place that he saw his father. It's clear to see that it's the main thing that sits at the forefront of Mark's mind when it comes to everything that he does. And I think until he comes face to face with his father again, it will continue to be a prominent part because he's sat in denial. Anger. Anger is a stage that I think we're seeing Mark enter, and it's one that I believe is going to continue to be a prominent part of the character as the season develops, especially with it looking like the title card cracking through could be connected to him getting his blue and black suit, which is a suit that he wore in the comics when we saw a different side to Mark, and one that was more connected to the darkness that was present within him, and the anger that was festering up inside of him too. We saw him show the first signs of aggression and anger when he was talking to Cecil inside of the restaurant and his temper got raised. Another time was when he raised his voice to Debbie when she mentioned about how nobody was thinking that he would turn out like his father before storming off. But the main place where anger was prominent was within the second episode, when he was standing face to face with Nightboy, and the anger was directly contributed to the mentioning of his father. When Nightboy compared Mark to his father, we saw that his whole demeanor changed as a response. He became more threatening, and was able to get Nightboy to give in to him in an extremely fast fashion, something that he'd previously been trying to do, so it showed that anger was something that Mark was most definitely feeling and going through. With him also looking at his hand as he raised it up after knocking out Nightboy and almost feeling the power that he had within him. I feel this could be something that could not only become a response to him feeling a certain way about his father, but it could become his coping mechanism in the next few episodes, as that darkness takes over and he starts to exhibit some of the behaviors that he feared that he would. Depression. With Mark, whilst there aren't any key moments where you can specifically call out that he's depressed, there are, however, undertones that are present throughout the core of the character where you can tell that he's a fraction of who he once was. For example, looking down at the cliff edge, flying around on his own, not being committed to getting into the small battles that he usually wouldn't second guess, opening up to Eve, sitting alone and reflecting on himself and everything that he'd been through, and also keeping himself occupied in order to take his mind away from the sad, lonely feelings that he's trying to push deeper and deeper within him. We saw that he denied the opportunity of taking a holiday retreat with his mother, which is something that they both needed. However, I feel he denied the opportunity to go because he knew that time alone with his mind and with his mother would be a constant reminder of the very thing that he's mourning and trying to avoid thinking about. Hence why he chose to work and be on call for Cecil rather than address what was going on within his mind. I would say that it's clear to see that Mark has some form of depression that's being injected into his personality and persona, alongside the anger and denial, causing him to have an overall presence that is quite somber, sad, and isolated. Even though there are moments that are filled with happiness, such as him getting into the college that he wanted to get into so that he could be with Amber, I can't actually think of many happy moments that he's exhibited over the course of the second season so far. Mark's father is at the center point of his broken mind, and like how Nolan broke the city into millions of pieces, broke his family into pieces, he's also broken his son into pieces too, and his mind is in a state of fragility where he's a fraction of who he once was, and instead, Mark is reacting to how he's feeling. Rather than existing and not needing to think as much about his actions, he's living in a state where he's constantly denying the fact that he could turn into his father, being angry at the fact that there's a possibility that he could well turn into him, and the stigma that comes along with being his son and being connected to evil, and also being depressed and mourning the life that he once had when his father was his hero and his family was complete. He's going through his own troubles, but at the same time, he still has to be there for his mother. And although it may not seem like he's there for her that much and that she's an afterthought of his, I think he's steering clear because he wants to protect her from not only what he might become, but because he knows that the way that he is at the moment, it could well lead her to feel worse about everything because he's no joy to be around. Mark's mind is in a state like we've not seen before, and he's a broken character. His father caused his unraveling, and for the state to become present, I think in order for it to be fixed, Mark needs to own the fact that he's not going to become his father. However, with him maybe potentially going on to find out that there are alternative dimensions out there where he did side with his father, he may realize that he's more like Omni-Man than he'd like to think. However, at the end of the day, I think Mark will gain control of his mind again. But for now, the fragile state is present as we enter the next episode in the season. So, there you have it. Mark's mind analyzed in Invincible Season 2. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. Do you see Mark embracing the darkness in this season? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.